Hey, Osyka Youth Group, Brother Reed here. This message is for Sunday, the 29th of November. We're still in the book of Colossians, chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 8 and go through the end of the chapter there, through the end of chapter 2. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving, and hope everybody's feeling better and doing better. We just, again, we want to pray for anybody that's having the issue with the coronavirus, and just lift him up in prayer. And just, again, we need to just stay focused on what we're called to do and who we're called to be. Sorry we wasn't able to go on our camping trip, but things happen. We'll replan that for a later date, try to get some better weather. It would have been miserable tent camping in the rain. But anyway, and then Caleb was sick too. And so anyway, we're going to pick up in chapter 2, verse 8. It says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ. For in him all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form, and in him you have been made complete, and he is the head over all rule and authority. And in him you were also circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, in the removal of the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised up with him through faith in the working of God, who raised him from the dead. When you were dead in your transgressions and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive together with him, having forgiven us all our transgressions, having cancelled out the certificate of debt consisting of decrees against us, which was hostile to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. When he had disarmed the rulers and authorities, he made a public display of them, having triumphed over them through him. Therefore, no one is to act as your judge in regard to food or drink, or in respect to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath day, things which are a mere shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Let no one keep defrauding you of your prize by delighting in self-abasement and the worship of the angels, taking his stand on visions he has seen, inflated without cause by the fleshly mind, and not holding fast to the head, from whom the entire body, being supplied and held together by the joints and ligaments, grows with a growth which is from God. If you have died with Christ to the elementary principles of the world, why, as if you were living in the world, do you submit yourself to decrees such as do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, which all refer to things destined to perish with use, in accordance to the commandments and teaching of men? These are matters which have, to be sure, the appearance of wisdom in self-made religion and self-abasement and severe treatment of the body, but are of no value against fleshly indulgence." So one thing that I noticed on this a few times is this phrase, elementary principles of the world. Elementary principles of the world is mentioned in verse 8, according to the elementary principles of the world. And then in verse 20, it says, if you have died with Christ to the elementary principles of the world. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit because of what was said in the previous verses. It talks about in verse 2, in verse 2 it says, let's see, where does it start at? That their hearts may be encouraged, having been knit together in love, and attaining to all the wealth that comes from the full assurance of understanding, resulting in a true knowledge of God's mystery, that is Christ himself, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. So we have this contrast. We have a contrast of God and all his wisdom and knowledge and the treasure of that, and the mystery and understanding and all that stuff that is referring to God and all of this. And then we talk about the elementary principles of the world. Um, uh, Elementary principles, it says, relating to or dealing with the simplest elements or principles of something. And we think about elementary school. So the world, according to God, all the ways of the world is very childlike. Um, you know, if all we learned throughout our life was just the elementary, the basic, the simple things that, you know, if all you ever learned was, you know, how to spell three-letter words or four-letter words, or how to add, you know, 2 plus 2, and your basic colors and stuff like that. If that's as far as you got, think about all the stuff you'd be missing out on. And you know, you think about that, the elementary principles of the world. The world is so um, dumb, I guess, to the word that I would say, compared to God. Um, just like our best is like filthy rags compared to God, so is our thoughts. Uh, uh, the Bible talks about how much higher his thoughts are than ours, how much, you know, our thought. He says, your thoughts are not my thoughts, and my ways are not your ways, and you know how simple we are compared to how um, complicated, I guess, in a word would be referring to him. You know, we're a coloring book and he is a TV. You know, we're um, uh, board game and he's the latest Xbox 360. You know, I mean that's the difference in him and us. So, you know, the comparison again is talking about, you know, the knowledge of God, and the hidden treasures of wisdom and knowledge that as Christians, you know, when our eyes are opened to Christ, and the more you read your Bible and the more you understand, the more God reveals to you, you start seeing things differently than you did when you were lost. Just like a child in the world, you know, in school, you know, as they grow, they learn more and more. There's more to it than uh, your basic colors. You have the mixture of colors. You have the reflective colors. You know, you have the metallic. I mean, you just, you know, if all can imagine just, you know, most of you guys never saw black and white TV. Uh, but you can still watch movies that are in black and white, and you watch that and you see how much different it is once they started coming out with color TVs, and now you have all the high definitions, and it makes the TV screen look real. It's like real people standing in front of you because of all the technology. And again, our life is so basic. Our life is so um, elementary compared to the way God has the plan for us. So as we learn more and more about him, as we trust him more, then he builds this transition to where we're no longer living in this elementary stage. We're growing up, and the more we learn, the more we grow, the more He allows us to understand. Um, so that's the big difference. Okay? But look at verse 8 again. It says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ." Now, guys, that's one thing that I am kind of have an issue with, is when the church, or Christians, or however you want to word that, um, they have these traditions, and look, traditions are fine, because traditions are kind of something we repeat. Okay, Thanksgiving holiday is a tradition. You meet with your family, you have turkey, you have dressing, you have all these things, cranberry sauce, all the things, and that's your tradition. But Paul is warning here. He says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ." So the thing that I have about with traditions is, if it's, especially when it comes to the church, if that tradition is man-made, that has nothing to do with the Bible, I think of it in this verse. Now, if it's against the way God does things, there's a problem. If it interferes with what God says to do, we have a problem. So that's what Paul says there. See to it that no one takes you captive. The previous verses was talking about, um, uh, in verse 7 it says, "Having been firmly rooted and now being built up in Him, established in your faith, just as you were instructed and overflowing with gratitude." He's talking about how mature they are becoming. And then he says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ." Because it's easy to get into these traditions, and we have to look at where they start. If it's a biblical thing, then we need to hold on to those traditions. But when it comes to a point where it takes us away from doing what God has called us to do, then there's a problem. I mean, I've heard it before in churches. "Well, we've never done this that way," or something. "We've always done this." Well, like, again, if that tradition, if that's the way you've always done it, if that lines up with God's word, we need to dig those ruts down, and we need to keep, stay in those ruts of following God. But if it is according to the elementary principles of the world and according to men, instead of, as Paul says, rather than according to Christ, that's when the problem comes about. And we have to be very, very careful when we get into those things. So, again, teenagers, as you grow older, have traditions, but those traditions need to be, the tradition of celebrating Christmas, the tradition of reading your Bible can be a tradition of going to church, but don't let those things become um, just something you always do. It should be um, not just a tradition and habit. I mean, it's a good habit to read your Bible. It's a good habit to go to church. All those things are good. But don't let it become just something you don't even think about. Uh, we should, when we go to church, it should be a tradition in the sense of we do it every Sunday, we do it every Wednesday, but it also should be like it should feel like Thanksgiving. It should feel like Christmas. It shouldn't feel like, well, I did that last week. It shouldn't get old to us. Is what I'm getting at. It should feel um, new to us every time, because we should be longing, as the Bible talks about, longing for a time with God, so much that if we spend time with Him every day, it's still not enough. It shouldn't get old. It shouldn't get um, we shouldn't get lost in the. There's a song. Let me think of how it goes. I'll think about it later on, that I might mention it. But anyway, um, Paul goes on, and I have some other things highlighted here. Um, in verse 18, it says, "Let no one keep defrauding you of your prize by delighting in self-abasement and the worship of angels." That's a funny way that Paul worded that. He don't say, "Let no one defraud you of your prize and delighting in self-abasement and the worship of angels." He says, "Let no one keep defrauding you." No one keep. So either they were uh, allowing that to happen already, or if it happens, don't let anybody keep doing it. So there's a couple of different, like I say, there's a couple of different ways there. Uh, but again, he don't say let no one defraud you of your prize by delighting in self-abasement and the worship of angels. He says let no one keep defrauding you. So if we look at it as, okay, someone has defrauded you of your prize, okay, and they try to do it again, don't let them do it. If someone is trying to, as it started out, uh, if let no one take see to it that no one takes you captive. Um, if it's that thing of you tricked me once, shame on me, or whatever, or shame on you, however that goes. That saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, I think is how it goes. Um, so if we are allowing people to uh, take advantage of us, allowing to steer us away from God, then there's an issue there. If we don't recognize it, and that's what it started out as, it says, see to it that no one takes you captive um, by empty deception according to the tradition of men. And then it says, let no one keep defrauding you of your prize by delighting in self-abasement and the worship of angels. So there's a big warning Paul is trying to get across to them, that we have to keep our guard up. That's the one of the things that, as Christians, sometimes people get comfortable, um, and we shouldn't, because the enemy never stops. The enemy's continuously looking for an opportunity to take advantage of us, to lead us astray, to um, distract us, to tempt us, and he never gives up. Um, I refer to Satan a lot of times as a bully. He keeps poking at us and teasing us, and he's looking for a response. And God knows our future, our past, everything about us. Satan just knows our track record, our past. So from past, he knows. It's kind of like going fishing. You can go fishing, and depending on what you're fishing for, if you're going in a stock pond that has catfish in it, then you know that worms, or uh, I remember when I'd go fishing with my dad, as a child, we'd take catfishing, we'd take worms, we'd take a loaf of bread, because you could take the white bread and make it into a ball and hook it on your hook and catch catfish. But if we were going fishing for bass, you can catch a bass on worms, but a lot of times you use a different bait, something flashy, something that gets their attention. Um, the same thing with us. Uh, Satan has his tackle box, and he's going to throw something out there, and if you don't bite it, then he's going to throw it a few times, and then he's going to switch out his bait. He's going to throw something else out there. He's going to keep on going in his tackle box until he gets something that's going to get our attention and get us to bite. And then that, once we bite, then we have this time of, just like a fish, they think that's regular food, and then there's a time there that they have an opportunity to spit it out or hold it in their mouth long enough for the hook to get set. So that's the same thing with us, and I think that kind of lines up with what Paul says here. He says, let no one keep defrauding you of your prize, and say to it that no one takes you captive by leading you astray in ways other than with Christ. So as we go through life, we have to pay attention. We have to keep our guard up. And if it's that saying, if things look too good to be true, they probably are. If it's too good to be true, then we need to, there should be a red flag. I heard this throughout my young Christian life, and I say young, not meaning I was young when I became a Christian, but as a new Christian, I heard people mention in church that, talking about how easy it was to be a Christian, and I kept struggling with that because it wasn't easy for me, and it's still not easy for me to be a Christian. So when people say that, I wonder sometimes now, the more and more I read the Bible, because Paul never in his writings never made reference to being easy to follow Christ, never even acted like it was, and I never seen anybody else acting like it was. I mean, Jesus said, you're going to be hated, you're going to be persecuted. They asked one of them said something about following him, and then he made a comment that he didn't have a place to lay his head. Following him was not, okay, we need, we're going to eat at the finest restaurants, and we're going to sleep at the fanciest hotels, and we're just going to have everything handed to us on a silver platter. It was just opposite of that. So when I hear people talk about, how easy it is to be a Christian, it kind of don't sound right, because it's totally against what the Bible talks about. So, and that's one of the things, like it says there, see to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ. Because according to Christ, following him is hard. So if you have people teaching you or trying to convince you that being a Christian is easy, then you have to be careful. You have to be on guard, because they can lead you astray. They can lead you into thinking, first of all, that it's easy, and then the words can change to where not only is it easy to follow Christ, that you really don't have to follow Christ. There's no need for that, or you're taking it too serious whenever you're, as Jesus said, denying yourself and picking up your cross and following Him. So we have to be careful about the influence that we have. We have to be careful about who we listen to. We have to be careful about who we follow in our day-to-day lives as believers, because we never know, you know. And it goes on, and I'm going to try to finish this up here. In verse 16 is I kind of skipped over this, but it says, "Therefore, no one is to act as your judge in regard to food or drink, or in respect to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath day, things which are a mere shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ." So now, we've talked about this many, many times about judging and all that kind of stuff, but it says, "No one is to act as your judge in regard to food or drink, or in respect to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath day." It leaves some things out on it. No one is to tell you, "Hey, you can't eat that." No one is to say what you drink or what you not drink, what festivals you go to, or which ones you honor or whatever, participate in, a new moon or a Sabbath day. But then we also know that there's times where people should hold us accountable, and our actions speak louder than words. So we have to be careful about what we do, where we go, who we talk to, what we even say. I don't think we need to worry about what we eat. I don't think anybody look at. I mean, some people make kind of, "Man, you're eating that. How can you eat that?" or whatever. Drinking, we need to be careful about that, of what we drink, because it can give people the wrong impression about Christians. So we have to be careful about that. Festivals, I would say, we have to be careful on that, because of what the festivals are like now. Mardi Gras and all that down in New Orleans, because of what that's turned into, we have to be careful. So I just got interrupted. But anyway, in verse 20 is another thing here that I'm going to touch on just a second here. In verse 20 it says, "If you have died with Christ to the elementary principles of the world, why, as if you were living in the world, do you submit yourself to decrees such as do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, which all refer to things destined to perish with use, in accordance to the commandments and teachings of men?" So, if, two letters, very important. It says, "If you have died with Christ to the elementary principles of the world." If. Not all people have died with Christ to the elementary principles of the world. So that's if. If you have. If you are a believer, if you have truly given your life to Christ, why, as if you were living in the world, do you submit yourself to decrees such as do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, which all refer to things destined to perish with use, in accordance to the commandments and teachings of men? So, here's the thing. That's the key, that last part. The key is in accordance with the commandments and teachings of men. You don't say in accordance with the commandments and teachings of Christ. Big difference. Big difference. And that goes back to that first part of do not see to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to tradition of men. Don't say traditions of Christ. Don't say traditions of following God. So the same thing here says, if you have died with Christ to the elementary principles of the world, why, as if you were living with the world in the world, do you submit yourself to decrees such as do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, which all refer to things destined to perish with use, in accordance to the commandments, with the commandments and teachings of men? That's the warning. Because man will come in and man will say, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that. Don't do this, don't do that. And that's what that's what Christ, when Jesus came to this world, he dealt with people that had made up all these rules and stuff that didn't line up with what God had planned. Okay? God had a list of rules. They had changed those rules. And because of the change there, they were no longer following God. Paul had the same issue because Paul was a Pharisee. And he had these rules that he had been following. And when he had the meeting with Christ, his world was flipped upside down because it was different. What God had said and what man had taught him was totally different. So that goes back to the thing of, as a church, as Christians, we have to be careful that what we say and what we do lines up with the Bible. Outside of that, here's the thing, don't let man's commandments and man's teachings interfere with what God has commanded and taught. So that's the warning there. And he says, do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, in accordance with the commandments and teachings of men. Now, there's things that God has said about do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, but that's a different group. So when God says, thou shalt not murder, well, man has twisted that into murder. Murderers don't, depending on who they are and who the person was they murder and the circumstances, you can get off. God has a different say in that. Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. The world has a different idea on that. The festivals, the what to eat and what to drink, all those things, God has a plan for that, and man has twisted it. Satan has twisted it. That was the whole deal with him all the way back into the garden, was he took God's words and twisted them to where they wasn't as strong, they wasn't as bold, they wasn't as firm as, and that was the question that he posed to Eve was, did God really say that? Sounds like he's telling you what to do and what not to do. Did he really say that? And she should have answered back, and Adam should have answered back too and said, yes, he did say that, and we're going to trust him and we're going to follow him. So that's where we're going to stop for the morning message, and we'll pick up a little bit into chapter 3 for the evening message. And guys, just stay focused, and we'll all get through this in God's timing, and just hope to see you all guys soon. All right, talk to you later.